Hello, everyone. So this is part two of our content on food, and this is new content that I haven't added to our site before. So many years ago, raising my family in Wisconsin, we would often go out to this beach. It was maybe a 45-minute drive, and it was on Lake Michigan, which is one of our beautiful, huge freshwater lakes in this country. And we'd take the kids and go swimming and camp out and stuff like that. And one year we went out there and we discovered that, alas, it was no longer a swimmable beach. It was covered with algae, like a very slimy, smelly algae that we had never seen there before. And so we kind of traced back the source of this, and we discovered a little stream that was running down a hill, was running right into this water along the beach. And the stream was contaminated. It was pretty um, smelly and carrying a pretty dirty looking. And so we kind of investigated. This is one of our favorite beaches. And we discovered that one of these very huge factory farms, this is back in the 1990s, factory farms that have very long buildings side by side by side, filled with animals stuffed in there with very little room to move, that produce a lot of manure because they're just considered like food machines. These animals are, these creatures. And they produce a lot of waste. And so the farmers would take the waste and spray it on the fields, which when the fields are frozen, it can't soak into the soil. And so it was creating runoff that had contaminated and polluted our beach. And so I think we all in my family were pretty horrified, not just that our beach was polluted, that was our immediate effect, but that all these animals were being treated in this way, these creatures that have, give birth and nurse their babies and all of that, just like we do. And that's how they're treated. So that was kind of horrifying. And then later we went up north and had a chance to visit a dairy farm. And I at that time, I think my third child had been born. Maybe I was even still nursing that baby. And we saw a cow who had just given birth, and within a half an hour, that calf was taken away from its mother and put into this machine that fed it like from a fake bottle, and none of the physical contact, none of the natural energy. The mother was so distressed. And so that, especially since I was nursing a baby at the time, it really bugged me. And then when I was living in North Dakota, I was riding horses one summer in 2011, this was. And the place in North Dakota is the source of a lot of our wheat. The Durham wheat is grown up there. And we kept going by these fields, and the people I was riding with are like, no, don't take the horses in those fields. They were all dead. There was nothing but dead weeds growing in the fields. And so what's going on? And they said, oh no, they've all been sprayed with chemicals, chemicals, herbicides, everything in those fields has been killed. You don't want to take the horses in there. That's toxic. And I'm thinking, so we don't want to take the horses in the field that's going to grow the food we're going to eat. And so all these things bothered me at the heart level, like at the intuitive level. I know enough about science to understand that chemicals break down, and ostensibly there's no lingering remains of them in the soil by the time we get to the wheat. We can understand the science. And yet at the same time, it was contrary to everything that I could think of that felt harmonious and healthy for the earth. So we garbage in, garbage out. So we're supplementing our soil with chemicals because we don't want to change the crops we're growing to put other crops in that could supplement the nutrients naturally. And we want to have big monocultures, that is, big fields growing just a single crop that can't naturally replenish the soil. The earth needs diversity in order to maintain a balance, and we're taking that away and then replacing it with chemicals. So long story short, those are the things that led me to want to include this chapter. So we have to ask the question, how can an individual really be healthy if the earth itself is not healthy? So that's the question that I pose here in this chapter. And I start with the learning that I had so very long ago in a book, Lame Deer Seeker Revisions, which was written by a Native man I don't really know much about the book. I just know I read it for a class when I was an undergrad, and it really impacted me. And I think I'd read things even before that, written by Native people, even as a child. And so I kind of had a little sense, the kind of sense that I, as an outsider, can gain of such a beautiful philosophy and belief about harmony with the earth. And so, and then last summer or two ago, I had the really privilege of reading all of Dr. Robin Kimmerer's work. And she is a remarkable scientist and also a member of the Potawatomi tribe, who writes extensively about our moral covenant of responsibility, the responsibility that we have to live in harmony with the earth. So I wanted to find a way to share this with you. And I know that you probably have a deep knowledge of these things already. Perhaps you do, deeper than mine, maybe. Nevertheless, I put it out there with the idea that an individual can only be healthy to the extent that the food that they eat is healthy, and that the earth that produces that food is healthy. So it's kind of a different view, and I haven't offered this work before. So you'll see that when you look in, you're going to see that you have to work in this chapter, just like you do in all of them. So you'll see that there's a total, I took care with this, there's a total of, I think, 3 hours and 10 minutes of video, which is just the amount of time that you would be spending in a class if you were coming face to face. And it's in video. That's better than me talking. We'll hear from Dr. Kimmerer. We'll hear from, I'm taking you into the factory farms. You might as well see where the eggs and meat come from in this country. And then we're taking a look at agribusiness, where the crops come from, and weighing all this out against Dr. Kimmerer's recommendations about our moral covenant with the earth. And then we're going to end up with a video I have shown before. It's called Forks Over Knives. And it looks a bit about the misguided ideas we have about what we should eat. And all of this is supplemented with not very much reading. It's supplemented with some work by Dr. Gary Navon, who is an ethnobiologist who's actually worked with Navajo people. And he kind of traces food back to its roots. And it's just about 4 pages, not much. And then there's a short 2-page thing from Dr. Kimmerer explaining her idea about this moral covenant with the earth. And then there's sort of a long article at the end, but you'll see that, and it's dated, it's like from the 1980s, but it's okay because it was tracing back the history of foods of the Navajo people. And you'll see that a lot of the pages in it are just listing the foods of the Navajo people that were eaten traditionally and the nutritional value of those foods. So this is what I'm offering you this week. I want you to go through it step by step. Watch the videos. In part 1, the ideal. The videos, I think, total 10 minutes. Watch them. The reading, I think, totals 6 pages. Not much. Read it. In part 2, you have just video. That's where we're looking at the source of our meat and how that's handled in this country. And there's a frontline documentary you'll be watching. Then in the third little section within the module, you're watching information about agribusiness and how our crops are raised. And then I have something else in there and I've forgotten. And then the last module is the video Forks Over Knives, as well as one more talk by Dr. Kimmerer and the reading about Navajo traditional foods. So there's no quiz, like multiple choice quiz this week. Instead, it's all reflection. And the reflections are just asking you to reflect on each content individually. So maybe take some notes on that. And so the first one, you're just reflecting on the ideal that's presented in the content. In the second question, you're going to be looking at the meat you've eaten in the last week or the meat that's in your freezer, thinking about where it's from, and then how it relates to that ideal for you. In the third reflection question, you're going to look at some products that you have in your cupboard and look at the ingredients, and then think about the source of that food. And in the fourth, you're just reflecting on how you feel about your responsibility, and how you think any of what you've seen might impact you at some point. And all of this, there are other views on what I'm presenting. So I present criticism or critique of the way we're treating the earth. Other people might argue with that perspective and say, well, it's not just that we have to provide food for many people, and this model of farming is very efficient and allows us to feed more people. And I would argue back and say, but are we feeding them? How healthy can be the food that we're feeding people if it comes from earth that is not healthy? And furthermore, we're primarily using it to feed animals, not to feed people. And as is pointed out in Forks Over Knives, it might be that feeding people so much meat is actually contributing to development of cancer and other unhealthy processes. So there's arguments there. And you, as wise, experienced, thinking people, can agree, you can disagree, you can do whatever you come from. Just make sure that you're putting sources. So if you disagree, for sure, make sure it's a good source, and it would be a good discussion. But I've never found the timing of discussions in this class to work very well. So it's just me, but let's engage with it. I hope it doesn't feel like too much. I think it's really important content. Thanks for tuning in. Let me know how you're doing.